Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. The person who has most helped me understand today's world of finance is Les Leopold. He's demystified the workings of Wall Street in his last two books. First, The Looting of America. He explains how the economy crashed in 2008, and in How to Make $1 Million an Hour, he explains hedge funds and how they work. Now I hope he can explain how the rich have become richer and the rest of us have remained the same or become poorer. So welcome. That's a big charge for you to do.
It is, but that's the charge we all have to work on.
Right. How have we come to this?
Well, it's a very interesting process. It started when the deregulation of finance took hold around late 70s, around 1980. And that set in motion an amazing string of events. The biggest one that we rarely talk about was the transformation of industry itself. There's talk of the corporate raiders in those days, but those have just been transformed into private equity companies and hedge funds. And what they basically do is buy up companies, load them up with debt, pay the CEOs and stock options, and then squeeze the living daylights out of the company to pay back the loans and pay for those stock options. They don't care whatsoever about the product being produced. They care about extracting wealth. I call it the strip mining of America. And this has been going on for a generation now.
Who is they?
They would be financiers, hedge fund people, private equity people, and their CEOs. The CEOs themselves have been transformed from corporate managers to financiers.
So they didn't rise in the company, they were brought in.
Sometimes they're brought in, sometimes they rise. But what the common denominator amongst them all is they want a lot of money.
So how does the financier make the money?
Well, when they make it in so many different ways, it's kind of hard to believe. They make it when they put the loan on the company that they're buying up, they get a fee for that. They get huge consulting fees and servicing fees for managing this whole process. They get stock, which then is driven up in price by buying up shares of stock. You know, a generation ago, companies did not buy up their own stock. Now they spend up to 70, 80% of their income buying up their own stock. By buying up your own stock, there's fewer stock, and each stock is worth more. And if you're being paid with stock options, this is how you make your money.
Nice.
Big money.
And are they hedge fund operators?
Some are private equity. They all have different names.
So the end result is the workforce shrinks, does it?
Well,
the bottom line becomes so important?
Well, what the net result is the wages of the workforce get squeezed. They no longer rise. In the old regime, it was retain and reinvest. You used your earnings, you invested it in your people with training and development, plant equipment. Primarily, though, your people were your investment. Now, it's basically extract and pay out as fast as you can. You no longer care about your workforce. You want to, if you can get by with temps, you bring in temps. I mean, Amazon. Contract people, temporary people. You don't want to have workers for the long haul. You don't need them. Your goal is to take money out of the company as fast as you can, and to load up the company with as much debt as it can handle.
So are these companies that produce a product? I mean, an actual physical project?
Yeah, but that's the secondary mission of the company. The first mission is to make as much money as they can for the new management team and the investors.
So that's what Romney did.
That's what Romney did. That's what Bain Capital
in his
does.
business.
Yep, that's what they do. What happens is you now get mega salaries for the people at the top. Wages at the bottom stay flat. We've had a generation now of wages actually staying the same and going down a little for the typical non-management worker. And you've seen wages for the top, compensation for the top executives absolutely go straight up and up and up and up. There's a huge gap between...
So does that mean when they buy up stock that they only pay capital gains on it for tax and not... It doesn't come to their income?
No, there's a different on top of all this, we're talking about billionaires, right? They make as much in 1 hour as the average worker makes in 40 years. You're talking about a huge sum of money. On top of everything else, they have their own loophole. These private equity hedge fund investors have their own loophole called carried interest, where their income is taxed as if it were capital gains. So they're basically paying like 19% less taxes than they should be paying. Now, the annoying part, if you want to understand runaway inflation, that loophole is enough to help us understand it. But the really depressing part is that both parties are colluding to keep that tax break in place. Jared Polis, a darling liberal Democrat from Colorado, wrote a letter to President Obama saying how important this loophole was for investment and jobs and the American way of life. I mean, tears would come to your eyes when you read this note. And this guy's he has like $100 million himself. They're all defending this outrageous loophole. In essence, they don't want to do anything. Both parties don't want to do anything serious.
Because in turn, they're also contributing.
Oh, sure. And there's this revolving door from congressional offices to Wall Street, from government positions to Wall Street.
It's all too cozy. It's a very cozy.
Very cozy and very rich.
It's all become.
Everybody wants a piece of the action.
Congress is a very wealthy body also.
It's a wealthy body, and many of the congressmen and staffers are determined to become more wealthy when they leave their public service. I mean, after all, what's public service for except to train you to become a multimillionaire? I mean, that's really
it's the greatest graduate school we have, right?
Well, yeah, if you can't go to Harvard Business School, you go to Congress, and
or you can do it locally. I mean, you look at a lot of the real estate people; they all worked in the Department of City Planning or something like that in the city.
Right,
it's a very interesting kind of thing.
Right, but what's happening though is that with the people that should be controlling this runaway inequality, they're the people that actually want in on it. So they're not going to control it, they're going to accelerate it.
This is the Congress.
This is the Congress, this is the president even. He appointed far too many Wall Street people all over the place, and he keeps talking about getting rid of this loophole, but it doesn't happen. It's not a serious thing. He's not going around explaining this to the American people. Going from unemployment office to unemployment office saying, you're paying, on your unemployment insurance, you're paying taxes, but these people aren't paying, you're paying more as a percentage than they're paying. I mean, there's so many ways you could highlight this.
Have we ever had a Secretary of Treasury that didn't come from finance field? It's interesting. Who knows?
You have to ask Nomi Prinz. The United States now is a nation where upward mobility is far behind that of Europe. Remember, Europe used to be the place of aristocracy and no upward mobility, and everybody's supposed to come here for upward mobility. In Denmark now, the chances of you going up the ladder are like 4 and 1. The United States is 50-50 at best, that you'll do better than your parents. So opportunity is now being crushed. We have, we view ourselves as this a very free and open society. We have the largest prison population in the world. Home of the free, home of the brave, land of the free.
Yeah.
We used to think communist countries, totalitarian countries were the ones that put all their people in the prison. We do that. And these are the people at the bottom of the ladder. When you have this runaway inequality, you're going to have a very large surplus population on the bottom. You criminalize their activities. They go into the underground economy, and they end up in prison.
And you have opposition to raising the minimum wage.
Well, what's interesting is, if you notice, in the last election, even in red states, voters, in fact, support the raising of the minimum wage. So that got me thinking, and this is sort of the hopeful part of today's conversation, got me thinking about why is that? And it turns out there's an enormous disconnect between reality and people's perception of reality. The American public, I believe, has no clue about how bad inequality is in the United States. They just don't get that. And when you think about it, first I'm going to have to prove that to you.
Yeah.
And second, I'm going to have to explain why that's the case. First of all, to prove it to you, there's this terrific international study where they ask all these social questions, and they interviewed like 50,000 people across the country, and there's 1,500 of them who are Americans. And they ask them questions like this. What do you think a CEO of a large company earns right now, and what do you think they should earn? And then they say, what do you think an unskilled worker working in a large corporation earns today, and what do you think they should earn? Well, if you take the answers to those questions, you get a ratio. And the results are absolutely astounding. The study did it internationally. I took out the American cohort and of 1,500 people and looked at it. This is the current CEO to worker wage gap. For every $1 a worker, average worker owns, CEO earns 354. This is what we estimate it to be, 30 to 1. And this is what we want it to be, 7 to 1. So there's a misestimation of a whole order of magnitude. The American public thinks this is what it is right now, 30 to 1, and they think it should be 7, and what it really is 354. Now, that is a remarkable result. Now, this is the one that's going to blow your mind. I went in, and they have the data coded by strong Republican, moderate Republican, centrist, moderate Democrat, strong Democrat. And guess what? A strong Democrat and a strong Republican agree that the wage gap is about 30, 40, 50, 60 to 1.
And they agree that that's too much.
Well, they think it ought to be. A strong Democrat says it should be 5 to 1, and a strong Republican says it should be 12 to 1. So that's they think.
That's how we got set.
So if we do 12 to 1, just think about how different that's a Republican, strong Republican, how different that is from 354 to 1. But the fact is they underestimate it by a factor of 10. And I did the same thing. They had it by educational groups. So I compared those with no college whatsoever, didn't finish high school, with graduate school. Same thing. Those who didn't finish high school said 5 to 1, and those who finished, who were in graduate school had graduate school education said 12 to 1. So the highly educated and the strong Republicans say 12 to 1. It's 354 to 1. Now that tells me something. That tells me that if only we really did a mass educational campaign on inequality, that something would happen. And the reason there's such a big gap, so that's the second part that I want to talk about, is because nobody on a consistent basis in the public arena harps on this issue. Democrats, Sherrod Brown maybe, a few Democrats bring this up on Elizabeth Warren, but
that's it.
Yeah, but even Elizabeth Warren doesn't pound on it with a program that says we're going to reduce it from 354 to 1 to 12 to 1. This is what we have to do. This is what our whole generation has to be dedicated to. So you don't get the leadership for this kind of populist undertaking from the Democrats. So where does it come from? It's not going to come from the media. It's not even going to come from the liberal media. It's not discussed.
It has to come from us.
Right.
But thinking about this, in New York City, we see evidence of such a difference of excess. I mean, we see that apartments sell for $100 million. We see that we don't have enough housing for people, the whole kind of thing. In a large part of this country, I don't think they see that excess.
I think that's a good point. I'd like to see this study done for New York City because, we may get it a little bit more. Also, by the way, at least we had two things happen here that shows the explosiveness. We have a mayor who's a little bit different, and we had Occupy Wall Street. It started here. And look at the outpouring. For a while there, for 6 months, there were 900 encampments around the world. I mean, this was that for a moment. It's like the blinders lifted, and Americans saw
the 99 and 1, but
right.
But it never really took hold.
It didn't take hold because of the it wasn't well organized. Matter of fact, it really wasn't organized at all. And it became a spectator sport. The groups that should have jumped in on it. I was talking to a labor leader in Buffalo earlier this week. I was up there during the storm. Just thought I'd visit.
Well, they had a suspicion
Right.
they were so suspicious of the unions and the part of the political group that
And
would
he
help.
was describing exactly that relationship.
Yeah.
But he finally admitted, he said, yeah, we should have just walked in and
Yeah.
took it over.
Taken over.
Yeah, saying, look, it's not just your movement, it's our
Right.
movement. We are the 99%. Guess what? That includes us too.
Right.
So you have to work with us. You can't just say, you don't want us there. Too bad. But we missed that opportunity. But we're going to have another one. I'm very impressed by the seriousness of a fair number of people in the younger generation, my son's generation, the college kids, and early 20s, mid 20s. They're serious organizers, and what I'm hoping to see happen is one thing that could unite. There are millions of not millions, but there's like tens of thousands of different causes out there, progressive causes that people are working on. The one thing that could unite them is a common education campaign to get their own constituents and the American public in general to understand income inequality. And that's what I'm trying to dedicate the next period of my life to, is providing accessible information.
That's what the Democratic Party years ago might have done.
Might have, right.
Yeah, yeah.
The party that did it, the group that did it the best are the populists of the 1870s and 1880s. They had, they were in a way the last serious challenge to Wall Street. They were getting so squeezed and so butchered by the financial system controlled in Lower Manhattan at the time, but in some of the other big cities as well. Their loans were, they're just getting ripped off right and left. And so the Populist Party tried to explain to basically rural America that we could have an alternative: public banks, cooperatives, et cetera. They had 6,000 lecturers going around the country doing these raps. And so every time I do one of these workshops with union people or community folks in these organizations, when I'm done, 40 or 50 people there or more, and I ask them, how many people here would like to learn how to do this talk, this rap? Everybody raises their hand. People want to do this, but it requires organization. So what I'm going to do is I'm writing a series of articles for Alternate and for Huffington Post, and then I'm going to I'm testing them on these issues from various different angles on runaway inequality, and then I'm going to piece it together in a book. The working title is As Bad as You Think It Is, It's Worse.
You always come up with these great titles.
I get help.
Well, I hope they do it soon, because I'd like to be part of it.
Me too.
I don't want to age out before it happens.
Right, really.
Now, let's tie it in to problems in the states, and then to pension funds and things like that.
Okay. The first problem in the states is they don't have their own banking system. Right now, when you pay taxes, where do you think the money goes? When I'm in New Jersey, I thought when I wrote a check, income tax, it goes to some place in Trenton, right?
Right, to the finance department of the state.
It doesn't go there. It goes to a Wall Street bank. It gets deposited in a Wall Street bank in every state in the country except North Dakota. They have a repository bank called the Bank of North Dakota, which is a public bank, and it was founded out of the populist era in 1919. And its CEO makes as much in a year as a Wall Street banker makes in an hour. Makes $225,000 roughly. Number two makes $125,000. You're talking about very modest incomes. They run a bank that's highly profitable. They made $80 million last year. It goes to the state treasury. When they make a loan, for every $100,000 that they make a loan to a business, the business has to create one new job in North Dakota. They work with students to keep loans down, the rates on loans down. They didn't gamble at all. They didn't lose any money in the financial crisis.
So now, well, let's just trace it. When it goes into that bank on Wall Street, then what happens to it?
Hey, whatever they want to have them to it.
They invest it.
Nationally, approximately $1 trillion of our taxpayer money goes into state relationships with Wall Street banks. $1 trillion. When that money is then loaned out, or however it's leveraged by Wall Street, they're not demanding that for every $100,000 they loan out, one job has to be created. If we had 50 state banks, we'd create an extra 10 million jobs using the same formula as North Dakota uses. State banks are also critical to financing infrastructure. Right now, in Los Angeles, they have all these different loans that they get from Wall Street banks. The fees on those loans are more than the budget for taking care of the streets of Los Angeles. And if they had Los Angeles is big enough to have its own bank. If they had a city bank, they could finance that themselves. They would be paying fees to themselves. They could be enriching the people of.
So New York City?
Be a great place to do it. Hell will freeze over before anybody lets them. I mean, they'll put us under martial law before they let that. Wall Street lets that happen here.
So New York City would take the property taxes that it collects.
Everything. Put it in a public bank, and then that bank finances infrastructure, school buildings, programs that.
Right now, it finances it through loans.
Right, from Wall Street banks.
Wall Street banks.
And all those extra fees are part of the runaway inequality. The whole system is we've given our financial system over
to Wall Street.
And we have to take it back.
And in turn, Wall Street then has controlled Congress,
and
a large part.
Yes, of course, and it will continue to do so. The only way around it is to set up a rival, competitive public banking system. And I think you'd find that first of all, you'd find plenty of people that would be willing to work for $250,000 a year instead of 40 or 50 million a year, and they would do a good job. And this mythology that you have to pay these CEOs and these Wall Street bankers these exorbitant funds.
You wrote an article about Chicago and about the pension fund and about Rahm Emanuel. What I want to know is, he went from being chief of staff or whatever he was into a job. So did Eric Cantor, I'm sure, all of these people. How did he make 18 million or however much you said he made in a year? What does he do in that job?
He was a deal maker.
So what does that mean? He just calls the people he knows?
Well, he got buyers and sellers together, or people who wanted a loan and people who needed a loan, and you get a little piece of the action. That's part of the extraction process. See, nothing new gets created. He didn't produce $18 million of value. He probably didn't produce any jobs. He might have actually cost.
That's another problem, isn't it? That the money doesn't go into producing goods. It goes into
their pockets. Ultimately, everybody's taking a little piece of it. The net effect is this huge gap, this runaway gap between financiers, their top CEOs, and everybody else. And it's accelerating. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And we're gonna pay dearly for this down the road. My worry is which way the country's going to go, because the Tea Party offers an alternative. It says, look, yeah, things are bad, things are horrendous, and the problem is government.
Too many
the problem is immigrants. The problem, they're going to take the right-wing financiers' wet dream, basically. Say, we want to cut down government so it doesn't regulate you anymore, and then they have their own little xenophobic.
When did the deregulation become so popular?
It became popular in the 1970s in the academic community, led, I think, in large part by Milton Friedman. During stagflation, yes, because we had a situation where unemployment was high and inflation had kicked off. In retrospect, largely due to the Arab oil boycotts, but there were other problems as well. Overheating of the Vietnam War, we were spending far too much. We had 700 military bases across the world. The economy got overheated, and these economists said, Keynesian economics is dead. Here's what you have to do. You have to get the government out of the economy, and there'll be this huge boom in economic activity. Cut taxes on the wealthy, get rid of regulations, screw the unions, and you're going to get a wonderful renaissance. And there was an economic renaissance, but it didn't trickle down. Wages stayed flat, but it did trickle up. And you have a situation now where the genie's out of the bottle, and it's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a generation's worth of work to begin to put it back. Yes, it starts with the minimum wage campaigns, but ultimately there's going to have to be legislation that says you cannot pay your executives more than X times what you pay your average worker. If you want to pay yourself more, you're going to have to pay your worker more.
What's also interesting is, if you look at the board of directors of all these corporations, there are a lot of people who are on many boards. That's also a very closed group.
Of course.
And then the compensation committees, then they have committees that determine the compensation.
They're pigs at the trough. They all want a piece of this runaway inequality.
And they get paid a lot to be just on the board of directors.
Once this is set in motion, once the money's flowing to the top, then everyone is trying to scramble to get a piece of that for themselves. And you know what? Ethics go out the window. The
morality?
Well, what happens is you develop your own self-serving morality. I've been around I live in a community where there are financiers. I've been around them, and I've watched how easily they can rationalize, right? The problem is not them, the problem is the government. The problem, if there's poor people around, it's their fault. You know, I was at a bike ride yesterday where we buy turkeys and bring them to the, bike them over to the homeless shelter. 10 years ago, they served 80 families on Thanksgiving. This is in Montclair, New Jersey. Now they're serving 1,000. 1,000 people that are having nutritional problems out of a town of 40,000, one of the wealthiest towns in the country. This is sick, and we're gonna pay dearly for this. I just hope that the progressive forces can actually challenge this and stop being, you know, kind of
trying to be neutral and no courage. Public officials, the lack of courage, and being smart, because it seems to me that when you're outspoken and you're there preaching to people what you really believe, you do much better. No.
Well, I think so, yeah. I think, look, this tells me, the chart we looked at tells me that people want more income equality. They don't want CEOs to get paid that much. If that was the #1 issue that politicians brought up, it would be wildly popular. But they're afraid to do it because they won't get any more donations.
So where do we see all your articles now? How are we going to do that?
Well, just about once a week, they'll appear in alternate.org. And then a week later, I reprint them in Huffington Post.
So also, if we Google you,
yeah,
we'll most likely see references.
Yeah.
All right.
Just Google me and inequality, runaway inequality. That's probably in every article I write.
So you're going to have to come back again because these programs just fly by. So thank you, Les.
Thanks.
And lots of good luck.
Same to you.
And let me know what I can do.
You're doing it. Just keep doing it.
All right. Thanks
Thank you.
again. If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.